Imagine being so spoiled that the biggest problem in your royal life wasn't famine, invasion, or political intrigue. It was flies. And instead of dealing with them like the rest of us, swatting, waving, or gritting your teeth, your solution was to have slaves strip. Flies were a fact of life. They endured them while farming, fishing, and cooking. They swatted them away during meals and cursed them during work. But Pepi II, he didn't endure. He outsourced. Later Greek and Roman writers, who loved collecting juicy tales of bizarre Eastern rulers, reported that Pepi had slaves smeared head to toe in honey. Their sweet, sticky skin became living fly paper, attracting the insects away from the pharaoh so he could lounge in peace. The image is both absurd and grotesque. Rows of human flytraps, glistening in honey, while the divine boy king reclined on a throne. A story that stuck. The honey anecdote may sound like satire, but it survived because it captured the essence of royal excess. Historians can't prove it happened exactly as told. It may have been exaggerated or invented to illustrate Pepi's detachment from reality. But whether true or not, the tale fit the pattern of a pharaoh raised in luxury, so extreme he literally used people as bug repellent. And in a way, that's why it stuck. Because no matter how many decades Pepi II ruled, no matter how many monuments he built, his name is remembered for one bizarre scene. The boy pharaoh who solved his fly problem with honey-covered slaves. Egypt's God on Earth. To understand why stories like this rang true, you have to appreciate how pharaohs were seen. They weren't just kings, they were gods. Every sneeze, every gesture, every whim of the pharaoh was treated as divine will. If the boy king said, "Cover that man in honey, so I can nap," then priests would nod gravely, scribes would record it, and servants would hurry to obey. To question him wasn't just disrespect, it was sacrilege. So whether the honey story was literal truth or political satire, it captured the dangerous reality of a world where unchecked power meant no request was too strange, no command too absurd. The flies of Egypt. There's also the environmental angle. Egypt had a fly problem long before Pepi II. Swarms plagued fields and villages, enough so that later pharaohs issued charms and amulets shaped like flies to ward them off. Ironically, in the New Kingdom, fly-shaped golden pendants were even awarded as military honors, symbols of persistence and bravery. So flies weren't just pests. They were embedded in Egyptian culture, both feared and respected, which makes the image of Pepi II surrounding himself with sticky human shields even darker. In a land where everyone suffered the same buzzing torment, the pharaoh supposedly turned it into a game of cruelty and convenience. Closing of Section 1. So here's where we are. A boy king ruling as a living god. A country sweltering under heat and plagued by flies. And a story, passed down through centuries, of slaves smeared with honey to act as human flytraps for a spoiled pharaoh who refused to swat his own pests. Whether literal or legendary, the tale of Pepi II's fly problem has lasted for 4,000 years, outliving nearly everything else about his reign. And in Section 2, we'll dive deeper into what this story tells us about power propaganda and why Pepi II, who may have ruled longer than anyone in history, is remembered today not for temples or wars, but for honey and flies. So, did Pharaoh Pepi II really cover slaves in honey to lure flies away from himself? Maybe. Maybe not. The problem is, the tale comes from later sources, mostly Greek and Roman writers who loved to mock Eastern rulers as decadent and absurd. They weren't exactly eyewitnesses. But even if it was exaggerated or entirely invented, the story stuck because it felt true. It fit everything people imagined about pharaohs: distant, pampered, worshipped as gods, and living in a world so far removed from their subjects that even flies became someone else's job. Truth or satire? Let's weigh it. On the one hand, the Egyptians were practical people. Their monuments, tombs, and writings show they valued order, stability, and survival. Smearing human beings with honey might sound too wasteful and grotesque to fit their mindset. On the other hand, pharaohs really did live lives of near incomprehensible luxury. Servants fed them, clothed them, bathed them, and followed elaborate rituals for even the smallest tasks. A pampered child king, surrounded by priests whispering that he was divine, could easily grow up detached from reality. So while we can't prove Pepi II literally ordered honey slaves, it's not hard to imagine courtiers inventing something similar to flatter him, or later historians exaggerating the truth into a sticky legend. Flies in Egyptian culture, what makes the story even juicier is how important flies were to the Egyptians themselves. Amulets shaped like flies were worn as protective charms. They symbolized persistence and toughness. Ironic, since Pepi II apparently saw them as beneath him. Military honors sometimes came in the form of golden flies, awarded to soldiers who showed bravery in battle. In that sense, the insect represented grit and survival. And in daily life, flies were constant companions, buzzing in markets, swarming near food, breeding in the marshes of the Nile. For ordinary Egyptians, swatting flies was part of life. For Pepi II, the legend goes, it was someone else's problem, solved with honey and human bodies. A very long reign beyond the honey tale, Pepi II's reign was extraordinary for one reason: its length. Ancient records claim he ruled for more than 90 years, the longest reign of any monarch in recorded history. Think about that. He became pharaoh as a child, and he was still alive when his great-grandchildren had grown old. For nearly a century, Pepi II embodied Egyptian kingship. And yet, for all that time, what history remembers most vividly isn't his longevity, his building projects, or his diplomacy. It's the story of the flies. A kingdom in decline, ironically, Pepi II's long reign may have contributed to Egypt's decline. By the end of his life, the old kingdom was crumbling. Central authority weakened, local governors gained power, and Egypt entered a period of political chaos known as the First Intermediate Period. So while later writers pictured Pepi smearing slaves in honey to chase away flies, the truth was far more serious. Under his watch, the kingdom itself was swarming with instability. Maybe the honey anecdote wasn't just a jab at his vanity. Maybe it was a metaphor for a ruler so busy distracting himself from minor annoyances that he ignored the real problems gnawing at Egypt. Why the story lasts, the tale of Pepi II's fly problem has survived because it's unforgettable. It makes us laugh, cringe, and shake our heads all at once. It reduces the grandeur of a god king to something petty and human, the inability to handle flies. And in a way, that's the heart of Weird Histories. Behind the temples and the monuments, behind the titles of Son of Ra and Lord of the Two Lands, there was still a man with annoyances, fears, and absurdities. Closing of Section 2, so here's the tally. A boy pharaoh who may have ruled for 90 years. A kingdom plagued not just by flies, but by decline. And a legend that he solved the insect problem by using human beings as living flytraps. Whether it's literal truth, satirical exaggeration, or propaganda, Pepi II is remembered today not for his monuments or military conquests, but for his stories sticky with honey and swarming with flies. It's proof that sometimes the strangest details outlive the grandest achievements. Because in the end, Pharaoh Pepi II may have worn the crown of Egypt, but history crowned him with flies.